Hello, hello, hello. Hello, my name is Connor Pack, and welcome to my podcast called The Switchback with Connor Pack. Yes, I'm aware that rhymes, and yes, I do think it sounds a bit corny, but I'll get into at some point, I guess near the end of this episode, why that is the name of this. But yes, this is my podcast, The Switchback with Connor Pack. So to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me, which I am assuming most of you listening to this, at least right now, are people that know me in real life, IRL, you know the real Connor. But if you don't know me, this might be a little bit of a recap, but that is okay. So I am Connor Pack. I am a 21-year-old person, male, living in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. If you haven't heard of Calgary before, if you've ever seen the hit 1990-something movie produced by Disney, I think, called Cool Runnings, that's where I'm from. Cool Runnings is a movie about the Jamaican bobsled team going to the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary. And yeah, that's where I'm from, where they go. I'm from Calgary. A bit about me. I recently returned from serving a full-time mission for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was a full-time missionary in Mesa, Arizona for the past 2 years, and I guess 2 months ago, I returned home from that. I previously was a business student in university here in Calgary before my mission, and that was great, but I am actually switching to psychology and continuing my studies at the post-secondary level in the fall at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. I also really like music, all things music. I have played violin since I was 6 years old. I love to sing, and I'm a very amateur guitarist, but I frequently record myself doing covers of some of my favorite songs, and I just love listening to music just in general. And apart from that, I just like being active. I especially like swimming, biking, and running. I'm not much of a triathlete, but I do enjoy those those activities separately. And so that's a bit about me. And I also have a podcast now, which I mean, honestly, my idea for this started out as a joke. But then as I thought more about it, I realized that I actually wanted to do it kind of seriously, but also kind of as a joke too. You know, I saw like a YouTube short the other week. I think I saw something similar to this like a long time ago, like before I went on a mission for 2 years. So like in 2021, I saw something, but I also saw recently a video of somebody, I forget who it was, but they were basically just doing a parody of podcasts in general. I think the prompt was like people on a podcast saying everything but nothing at the same time. For example, I could be on some fancy podcast, right? And I could just say like, like the thing about that, the duality that globalistic paradigms present in this altruistic, democratic society presents a referendum of hypotenuses for us to consider on the daily, right? Like that means nothing. But just throwing out big words, I thought it was hilarious, and I'm like, I should do something like that. Just as a joke. But I don't know. I have real things I want to talk about too. I like podcasts. I've actually hosted a podcast before. Fun fact. When I was on my mission, I was in a church building in the part of Mesa, Arizona, where I was serving. For those of you who don't know, Mesa is a city in Arizona, obviously, but it's in the East Phoenix Valley. And so Phoenix is like a big metropolis, like 5 million-ish people in it. And 500,000 of those people, roughly, live in Mesa. It touches Tempe, where like Arizona State University is, and Scottsdale and Gilbert. It's just kind of in the east of the valley. And so I was there in Mesa. Good times, right? I was at a church building one day. And me and my missionary companion were walking into the building for some reason. I forget what was going on. And this other companionship who served in some congregations nearby was in the building. And one of them was he came up with the idea, and he was making a podcast for our missionary Facebook page for the Mesa, Arizona mission. And he had a studio already reserved. Some member of a different congregation across town had offered to let him use the studio to record this podcast, and they had like professional equipment in there. And some other dude he knew had like this like super fancy camera they were gonna film it on, and he had a host, I think, originally, and the host backed out. And so I walk in, and as missionaries, the guys are called Elder, then their last name, and the sisters or the girls are like Sister so and so. So I was Elder Pack. He's like, Elder Pack, it's you, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, would you want to host the podcast for me? No, that wasn't even it. He's like, dang, Elder Pack, I don't have someone to host this podcast, and I'm like, I can do it. Then he's like, sure. And so a week later, we took like an hour and a half out of our day, which was like totally worth it. Totally worth it. And we drove across town. Mesa's not super big, so across town was like 10 minutes, not even. We drove across town to this studio, and I interviewed this person I had not met before. The theme of that podcast was how his conversion to Jesus Christ had grown over his life and experiences he had, and it was the guy was awesome. Shout out to Trent Powell, just straight up homie, right? But just in general, interviewing him and just being on a podcast, I found it super, super fun. And even after the fact, listening to it, I'm like, dang, I don't think I'm like super, super talented or earth-shatteringly good at being a podcaster, but just a podcast host, not podcaster. But it was just a fun experience, and so I figured may as well do it myself as well if I find it so fun. And so I had this idea originally like a couple weeks ago to make this joke podcast, and then I had that reflection like, dang, I actually do like hosting podcasts, or that podcast I hosted. So I've invested in a microphone to record with, and we're gonna go for it. And so I do have some previous experience in quote unquote content creation. I am no influencer, but I did have a YouTube channel, which I have a new one. On my old one, before my mission, I had this thing going, kind of stupid, but kind of funny, called Vlog Family Vlogs. And so I would just take like random videos of myself just living my life, and I'd put it like on compilations and put it onto my YouTube channel. And so it was like a bunch of mini vines compiled together. For example, there was one I remember, I was like walking out of a Mexican restaurant, or I think it was Mexican. It's called Costa Vida. It's here in Calgary, and I'm singing at the top of my lungs, "I'm Every Woman" by Whitney Houston for no reason. Another one I can think of is me just in my car, just staring at the screen, and I start singing a Maroon 5 song. A lot of them had to do with like random singing bits. I'm trying to think of what else I had. Me just doing like Fortnite dances at this community event. I mean, the greatest outdoor show on earth in Calgary, called the Calgary Stampede. Just random stuff like that. And I just put them into compilations and post them and get maybe 10 views. So I mean, like, I was YouTube famous, I think. But I did have some more serious videos. Not like super dramatic, but I mentioned before, right? Like I recorded sometimes covers of songs. I would sing and play guitar. And so I posted quite a few of those before, and I still do for fun. Just a thing I enjoy doing. But my original pursuit in the world of content creation was when I was 16. Yeah, 16 years old. And I created an account on Instagram anonymously called Fresca Friday. Fresca Friday was life altering for me. It changed my life, and it didn't really, but I like to over amplify it because I thought it was funny at the time, and I looking back, I'm proud of 16-year-old Connor for doing that. He really showed the world who was boss. I'm not even sure what I mean by that, but 16-year-old Connor just knew what he was doing when he did that. To explain Fresca Friday, my high school had vending machines in it. Crazy, right? Vending machines, right? And so it offered 3 things, maybe 4 things. Dasani water, Diet Coke, regular Coke, and Fresca. And Coke is great. Water's great. Maybe not Dasani. I'm more of an Evian water person myself, from the French Alps, but Dasani's pretty good. But I do love me some good Fresca. Fresca is like a grapefruit soda, I think, sugar free, sans sucre, as the French side of the bottle said. But I would buy one frequently with a toonie. A toonie is a $2 Canadian coin for you Americans in the audience. But yeah, I'd put one into the vending machine. It cost $1.75, and so I got a quarter back. And it turned into a thing, really just like a joke amongst myself, or joke just for me. Like, I would buy a Fresca every Friday, and it was Fresca Friday because alliteration's cool and it was funny, and Fresca's cool, and I had to kind of budget too. I couldn't have a Fresca every day. And so I started doing that, and then that was in my grade 10 year. And in grade 11, some people that I knew had some, not anonymous, they had a Instagram account with pictures of them every Wednesday going to Burger King, celebrating Whopper Wednesday. They would buy a Whopper from Burger King, and they would eat it and post a picture and post it, and that was it. And it was getting pretty popular. They had like 40 followers, I think. It was crazy. And so I was thinking, to be funny, I just decided that I would make an account anonymously for my ploy of buying Frescas on Fridays that not many people, if anyone, knew about. So I made an anonymous account on Instagram with a picture of the Fresca logo, and I just post like a video of my hand, not my face because we're anonymous, but like my hand, operating the vending machine, sorry, and buying a Fresca, or like pictures of two Frescas together, like I found my friend today, or like a picture of like a 2-liter Fresca at the grocery store, just stuff like that. And I marketed the heck out of that. And by marketed the heck out of that, I just friend requested every person I knew in my high school, and I eventually amassed, I think like 55 followers. And so we beat Whopper Wednesdays, and then the account kind of died off. But every once in a while, like once in a blue moon, someone will be like, "Are you Connor? Are you the guy that did Fresca Friday?" And I think that's really just happened twice in my life, but still, it was quite the accomplishment, and definitely a worthwhile first venture into the world of content creation and becoming internet famous. So with that background, I am not trying to become internet famous or anything with this podcast. This is honestly just a for fun project for me to do. And that project, again, is this podcast called The Switchback with Connor Pack. And so what is this podcast? Like, what is going on? What's a switchback? Let's start with that. A switchback is... I Googled the definition before I recorded this because I knew what it was, but I also had to define it like pretty properly. And so I'm not going to plagiarize, and so the definition's not in front of my face anymore. But Google says something along the lines of it's like a 180-degree turn, like on like back and forth trails up a mountain. And so if you think of a mountain or a hike or anything, sometimes when it gets really steep, there are switchbacks. It'll go back and forth to kind of help you to have the strength, I guess, that you need to scale this mountain, right? And so I don't think I'm a very avid hiker. I have been on hikes. I have been outdoors. I live next to some pretty beautiful places. Canmore Provincial Park and Banff National Park. If you've ever heard of Lake Louise, I live like 2 hours away from that. And so I live next to some cool places. And I've been on hikes. I'm not a hiker. I'm not a pro. I'm not Alex Honnold, that guy from Free Solo who just like scales mountains without harnesses just to be cool. Like, I'm not that, but I've been outside and I can appreciate a good hike when I go on it. And one that I went on semi-recently, like a year ago or a year and a bit ago, was in Arizona when I was living there. It was a pretty popular hike in the area called the Wind Caves Trail. It was in I think a state park, or maybe it wasn't a state park, but it was a place called Usery Park. I don't know if it is a state park, but it's a park just northeast of Mesa. And so on one of my days off on my mission, me and my missionary companion and a couple other missionaries that I served around at the time decided to go on a hike there. So we drove out there and we embarked on this journey. And so it started off with just a pretty mellow incline. We could look back and still see our vehicles like kind of full size behind us. And as we walked further and further, it was further away, but it was relatively flat. There was lots of cacti everywhere, so those kind of blocked our view a little bit, but you weren't too high up. But then it got pretty steep pretty fast. And I remember, it would go back and forth like hikes do. And there's those periods of turnaround, or those spots where the path flips around. And you sometimes, usually when you take a water break or something, it's on those switchbacks, right? And when you take pictures, a lot of the pictures I took just happened to be during those water breaks on those switchbacks. And we were able to see as we scaled this mountain and got higher and higher, all that we had accomplished, all of the ground that we had covered, and where we were, right? And we could also look up and look at all that we still had to do, and look up at the wind caves, or it was more like a big one cave, I guess. That's the main destination. There's more that people can go higher up to see, but we could look up at the caves above us and the end goal of where we wanted to be. But we were not perfect in this journey. We did not have the most flawless hike. I remember that morning it was a little bit chilly, and so I had a fleece on and some cotton heavy Walmart sweatpants, thinking it's Arizona, yeah, it's March, yeah, but it's gonna be cold today. So I decided to bundle up, and after a few minutes of hiking, we were sweating, all of us, and I was especially sweating because I had all these layers on for really no reason. It was cold at the beginning, but later on it wasn't really. And so that was my first mistake, and I'm pretty sure someone must have fallen at one point or tripped at one point or something. And I can't think of a bunch of really big extreme examples. It was a relatively smooth hike, but we did not do it perfectly. But even so, we were still able to make it to the top and make it back down, and we did it in our own way. And we had a lot of moments of reflection. I don't know if we were consciously thinking of it in some, grand sense of reflection. We just kind of looked up and down like, well, that's the hike. But I was thinking about that as I was thinking about making a podcast last week. Less about that story and more about just the name, right? I was thinking of a name. I was in my car just spitballing and trying to come up with a cool name. I'm like, The Ascent with Connor Pack. I knew that I wanted to do something along the lines of self-improvement and learning from other people, but I didn't know what to do. So I was thinking The Ascent with Connor Pack, or this one was pretty cool. This was going to be the name for a while. The Podcast. So not just The Podcast with Connor Pack. It was going to be The Podcast. So ... ellipses, right? The Podcast. Wait for effect. Yeah. So that was the name for a bit, and I don't like that. And I was in my car, and I was just spitballing what rhymes with pack. Back. Switchback. And I'm like, you know what? I like that. Because, going back to that story about the Wind Caves trail I went on, those switchbacks, in that grand sense I was talking about, they provided that opportunity for us to reflect on where we had been and look forward towards where we were going. And we did not have a perfect journey on this hike. And I don't think anybody has a flawless hike unless you're world hiker number one. But, excluding that dude, most people don't hike perfectly. They have some mishap happens. They trip, they misstep, something happens wrong. But regardless, they still did the hike in their own way, and they still learned from it, and they still had a good experience. And I think in life in general, that same thing is true. We each have our own mountains of mortality that we embark on. Each of us has our own mountain that is our life that we have to climb. And each of those mountains presents different challenges, different terrains, different slopes, different everythings, right? And none of us complete these journeys without flaw. All of us have things that we have to work on throughout our lives, and and challenges and hard experiences and just formative experiences rather, that help us become the person that we are today and will help us in the future to become the person that we need to be. And so on our switchbacks, those periods of rest, those periods of reflection along our life's journeys, we can look back appreciatively at the person that we used to be. We can look back appreciatively, I hope that's a word, at the experiences that we've had, both good and bad, both easy and especially hard, because the hard experiences are the ones that, in my opinion or in my view, help us to grow and change the most. We can look back at those experiences, right? And they can help us to just recognize what we're trying to do. And as we look forward, we look up from the switchbacks, we can see where we need to go. And in the case of that Wind Caves hike I was doing, I mentioned briefly, I think I mentioned at least, that there is that one main cave that you would go to. It's less of a cave and more of just like a cool lookout, like with like a little cave type thing carved in by the wind. That's why it's called that. But there is a lot more that we could have done on that hike, but we decided just to go back. And so we could have had more of our choose your own adventure experience on that hike, but we just opted to end it at the main location and head back. But, comparing that to our lives, we all have places that we can go, but there's also a lot of variety and a lot of variance in where we can go with our lives, which is a good thing, right? All of us have the opportunity to choose and carve our own paths. So, relating to my idea to make this podcast, the Switchback with Connor Pack, yes, it does rhyme. Yes, it's kind of corny, but I decided to make this podcast to just explore this concept further, explore this concept of learning from where we've been and looking forward to where we're going, and just trying to make sense of this imperfect journey that is life. And, as interesting as I am, I am opting to include other people for the most part on this podcast. I will interview mostly just friends and family, and in a variety of ways, just talk about this journey of being human, this journey of scaling or climbing our own mountains of mortality. And we will just take a look back at where we've been, where other people have been, where humanity has been, whatever, right? And look forward to where we can go on our journeys and become better and better each day. We can have a negative perception of the past, a negative perception of the future, and I, of all people, have definitely fallen into that trap of negativity. But I know and I believe that when we're positive in our perceptions of the past and our perceptions of the future too, right? When we're positive in those perceptions, we can have a lot more meaningful of a life experience and find a lot more joy in the imperfect journey that each of us embarks on. On my mission, it was a great experience, and I had the opportunity to meet and learn from a lot of people. People that I taught the gospel of Jesus Christ to, people I met on the street. One story I like to tell is this random dude I met in this sketchy-ish part of town I served in that was carrying a hatchet or an axe. And his whole reason for that was because there might be a fire and he might have to save someone, right? He had experiences in his life that made him decide to do that. Yes, he was under the influence, quite obviously, which was sad. But even so, he had his own road that led him to that point, right? And so all of us can learn from other people. And I definitely learned a lot from the people I met in my mission. And I learned a lot from my friends now and my family now and just people in my life. And all of us can learn from other people. We can learn from ourselves too. But I really just know that there's a lot of joy that comes from learning from other people, interacting with other people, and just allowing other people to help us on our journeys, on our climbs, and allowing other people to look back from our switchbacks at life in general and at our lives and their lives and everything. We just need other people to help us look back from our switchbacks, to learn from our past and look towards the future with hope. And so I really hope that kind of made sense. I do like to speak and I do like to get carried away on tangents too. And so to conclude almost conclude, I guess, I just wanted to read, I guess, word for word, actually, a little introduction I wrote for this podcast that will at least be displayed on the Spotify version of this. But here we go. I wrote today, this took me a little bit because it was a 600 character word count, and I love to go over word on things. So I wrote, "Hi, my name is Connor. As a 20-something-year-old kid, shockingly, I have not yet figured out how to live a perfect life, and I probably never will. This is a dilemma I share with literally every person alive today. Everybody is on their own uniquely challenging ascent up their own mountain of mortality. Since perfection is unattainable, all that anyone can do is keep on climbing and keep on trying. As we rest on the switchbacks of life, we can take inventory of where we have been and apply lessons learned to our life moving forward. In this podcast, my guest and I will do just that. My guest and I will do just that." All right, so just that, of course, being looking back at life, looking back at the lives of my guests and looking back at my life and just life in general, taking inventory of where we are right now and just looking forward, hopefully, to a better, imperfect, but full of effort and effortful tomorrow, right? And so I'm very excited to embark on this project. It very much is just for fun, but I do believe strongly that as we learn from other people, the experiences that they've had, and learn from our own lives, and just take those moments of reflection to reflect on where we've been, where we are now, where we're going, we can live a much more fruitful, much more meaningful life, because life is full of learning. We're never not learning. We're always learning, and what better way to do so than looking back at where we've been, and especially by learning from other people. And so I'm very, very excited to make these episodes over the next little while, and I hope that some of you might find some joy and some insight in the episodes to come. And so, yes, that is the first episode. I'm going to play with some features on my editing software, and there'll probably be some music at some point. You know what? As I'm talking right now, there's probably music playing, but I don't know it yet because I haven't played with that tool yet. But we're just going to end it here. We're not going to re-record because, life is imperfect. Lit. All right. Well, this has been the Switchback with Connor Pack, episode 1. See ya later. Bye.